This is day one with my 2021 Kentucky Extreme Mustang Makeover Mustang. This is tag number 6334. He is a 4-year-old BLM Mustang gelding from the Paisley Desert, Oregon herd management area. This is my first time stepping in the pen with him. I want to right away get a feel of him and his energy, and I like to try and work on getting them to face up. And that for me can either be they actually turn and face me, or they stop moving and they just turn their head and look at me. But I'm going to play around with my energy and my body language, and I'm going to do a little bit of pressure and release to get him to look at me. And that's just all I want to see from him. You'll see that when he does look at me, I'm going to take my body away, I'm going to walk away from him and release pressure. In the wild, any predators that a Mustang would have, they're going to push, push, push. They're not going to back off. So when you're working with a wild horse, it's really good for them to see that you will back off. And it kind of shows them that you're not out to get them. You're not a predator. My goals for this first session were to, of course, get first touches on him. I really want to get his halter adjusted because it stretched down a lot on the trailer ride and his noseband is sitting way too low for my liking. And then I would like to get him starting to lead so that I can get him out of the muddy pen. This pen has been super muddy due to the rain, so I'd like to get him walking a couple feet over to the covered round pen so we can start working in a dry environment. And then he can, of course, start drying off. I really like this moment right here where I caught his eye, and when I took pressure off of him, he gained the confidence to step into me and face me, and he got a little bit nervous and walked off after I looked at him for too long, but that's alright. And when he did that, I just kept moving with him. I wanted to keep playing around with my timing and body language and just get him at a good point where he was confident and comfortable, where we could keep building up and close in on that barrier between us. A big thing that I try to do when I'm closing in on my barrier with the Mustang is I keep my shoulder directed at them. I do not walk up to them face first. If I can kind of keep a neutral position where I'm not too intimidating, it goes a long way. And you'll notice that I'm doing slow steps and bits and pieces. I'm not just walking straight on towards him. That would just set him off. If I can do it in little bits and pieces and just build my way up there, it makes it a lot more easy for him. It takes a lot of pressure off of him, and it helps him adjust really well to me getting closer, because humans are scary to him. His world has nothing to do with people. He believes that he doesn't need anything to do with people, so I have to show him that he can trust me and that I'm not going to hurt him, so I have to go slow and steady with that. I'm applying a lot of pressure to his bubble right now by getting in closer, so I wanted to make sure that I relieved a little bit of pressure off of him and walked a few steps away just to show him that I'm not going to constantly put a lot of pressure on him. Now, if I had completely walked across the pen, I probably would have had to restart, and he has a good enough mind on him where I didn't have to do that, and I could just take a few steps and build off of that, and he'd be fine. Here I'm reaching my hand out, and I'm just looking for him to show me any signs of interest. I want to see him look at my hand, his nose slightly twitch towards my hand, anything that goes for it. But he's not a very curious horse, so I kind of figured that out after I played around with it a little bit. I've demoed a little bit over 30 Mustangs, and I've gotten a good feel of what they need after this point. He kind of showed me that he wasn't the type of horse where I needed to wait for him to reach out to my hand and build off of that. He was super comfortable with me being around him. He is not curious. I had to bring my hand up to his nose just to get him to smell it before I relieved pressure. So going off of all of that, I knew that each time I brought my hand up, I was pretty much going to have to initiate all of it. I was going to have to bring my hand up to his nose and build myself up onto his face. He wasn't going to do all that for me. He wasn't going to reach out and smell my hand. He's just not a curious horse. I'm making sure I take my time with each time I go to initiate some form of touch. If I just whip my hand towards his face and try rubbing him all over, that is super intimidating and will scare him off and kind of take away a lot of our trust and relationship that we're building up. Doing all the pressure and release, having low energy with a wild horse, when you're trying to get all these first touches in, it just shows them that you're not someone they need to be fearful of, because you don't throw a ton of pressure at them, you don't overwhelm them. You make all of this initial gentling easy and calm, and it helps them so much as they progress through all their training. I can tell that he's one of those Mustangs that's a little bit more guarded of his head, and those sort of horses do a lot better when you initiate touch on their side and then build up to their face a little bit later on. So that's the route that I decided I was going to go with him. And since he was doing so well and being so calm and not bothered by me touching him, I decided, that was the perfect point for me to relieve some pressure. If I just kept touching and kept pushing, I would have set him past his limit and then we would have had to reset, which is the last thing that I want. I really liked that when I stepped away from him and I released some pressure off of his bubble, that he had the courage to turn his head and look at me, and he just paid a lot of attention towards what I was doing far away from him. And for some of these Mustangs, that's really difficult for them to do. I've had some horses that just they cannot bear to look at me. They're just so terrified and they just are so scared to look at me that they're just frozen. And I really like seeing a horse like him where they can turn their head and look at me and they're not just completely shut down. So I did like that a lot. A big thing that I don't do is that when a horse steps away like that, where you can tell that they're uncomfortable, I don't continue to push them. I back away from them because this is a wild horse and it's super easy to lose all of their trust in you. So if I were to keep pushing him right there, it's like that predator instinct where you just constantly apply pressure and you don't back off. So when I noticed that he had some discomfort with what I was doing, I backed off and I reset and I went again and I showed him that it was okay. And that's something that I will do with every single wild horse I start gentling. Here I'm doing a lot of approaching to touch, and I'm a little bit slow still. I'm still keeping my shoulder at his shoulder. I'm making sure I'm not intimidating. But I'm making sure that I touch him, get him comfortable, and then I relieve pressure and I back off a little bit. And I do that a few times over and over again. I just want to make sure that he does understand that I'm not going to just constantly throw pressure at him. I'm not going to overwhelm him, that I'm going to back off and I'm going to relieve some pressure off of his bubble. And that's something that I really like to make sure that these Mustangs know as I gentle them, because it's so easy to ruin your relationship with them and your trust with them if you're just constantly throwing stuff at them and you're not backing off and giving them a chance to breathe and have their own space for a second. So now that we've gotten our first touches in and we've gotten acquainted with each other, we're getting comfortable, it's time to start leading so that I can get him out of this pen and we can get into a nice dry covered round pen so we can get out of the mud. It's time to start leading, and I don't usually leave a drag lead on. If you guys have followed me with some of my other Mustangs, you know this, but I'm at someone else's facility this time and I don't want to hog any spaces by taking up too much time, and I kind of want to get him out of the way quickly, which, sounds kind of bad, but it's just me wanting to make sure that I'm not being overbearing or just wasting space for someone else's workplace. So I had to skip the steps of haltering him myself and whatnot, but that's alright. It's still the exact same process. Right here, I'm trying to put some pressure on his halter, and I'm looking for him to step into it. And right there, even if he lifts his leg, even if he takes a super baby step, I'm going to release pressure. When he feels that release, he's going to know that that was the right answer, and we can build off of that. Now, sometimes teaching the Mustangs to lead can get pretty ugly. Some of these horses will bolt and start bucking or rearing as soon as they feel pressure. Others will make you just play a little bit of a tug of war with them. But that's kind of part of the process. They need to learn what that pressure means and how to properly step into it and give into the pressure. And from there, you can build off of it. A really important thing is that I need to make sure that I keep pressure on as long as I can until he gives me the right answer. And there are going to be some moments where it's a little bit difficult to do that, but I'm just going to keep working at it and try my best to get him to give into the pressure at the right moment. Working in the mud, it's a little bit difficult. The rope's all slippery, the footing is slippery, it's just a little bit messy. So we're going to have extra mistakes because of that, but we're just going to keep working on it, and I'm going to look for any chance I can get to release pressure when he gives me the right answer. And like I said before, one of my first goals, once I can work on it, is to get his halter adjusted. It did slide down a lot. It's a very stretchy material and he has a very tiny head. So I'm not very fond of where the placement is, but I can't quite get that adjusted yet until he's comfortable with pressure and whatnot. So I'm pretty quickly working on getting that done because I just would really like to get that noseband lifted up and off that pressure point on his nose. I had a little bit of camera issues for a second that missed some parts due to storage failure and whatnot, but right there he got a little bit worried about the rope and he turned himself around. Here he got a little bit more tangled and I just ended up dropping the rope. When he got in that situation, I didn't hold pressure at all because I didn't want to make it worse. I was just waiting for a moment where he could get the rope out from underneath him and I can just build up from that again. I don't want to keep holding pressure if it's going to make it worse. I only want to use that pressure if I can find a good ending to that and we could actually move forward from it. So right here, I'm just going to ask for a little bit of pressure towards me and look for a nice solid step. Right here, he got tons of forward movement, which was really great. It was like something in the distance kind of scared him a little bit because as soon as he stepped forward, he realized how close he had gotten to me, and he was super nervous and wanted to back up a bit. So I'm just going to try and encourage him to get back forward and get a little bit closer to me. We're back to playing tug of war a little bit, but as soon as he steps in, I'm going to release again, and he's not going to feel that pressure anymore. And after working on all of that leading work and having a lot of high energy moments, I wanted to make sure we took a step back and took a breather and worked on some more touch work. I wanted to get to touching his face a little bit and just get him comfortable with me again. I just want to kind of tackle how guarded he is of his head. He understands pressure a little bit, so I'm putting just enough pressure where it kind of shows him that he can keep his head there and it's not going to hurt him. Nothing bad happens. And I'm going to slowly pretty much relieve that pressure off of him. It wasn't enough where it's uncomfortable, just enough where he can feel a little bit underneath his chin, and I can kind of guide him back. And I just want him to feel that nothing bad happens when I touch his face. He's very guarded of it, and he was very uncomfortable with it. But once he saw that it was okay and nothing happened, he was pretty comfortable, and he never had any issues with me touching his head after that. It's really noticeable here after I gave him a couple seconds to just chill and soak in what we did. As soon as he felt that halter pressure, he was super, super responsive compared to how he was before. And it's like just being able to stand and take it all in really sunk in and showed him what the answer was. And we never really had issues after that with our leading. He knew what the pressure meant, so it was pretty cool to see how quick that sunk into his brain. It really shows how smart he is. So once I had gotten him a little bit more comfortable with his head being touched and he understood what pressure was, I was finally able to start working on his halter because he was at a point where he was going to be okay with that. He wasn't as freaked out. He wasn't as nervous about his face being handled. And I really, really wanted to get that noseband up because it was bothering me so much. He had the entire trailer ride home with it down, and that as soon as I stepped into the pen with him this morning, I was just determined to get that noseband up because I hated seeing that. So he was really good about tolerating that, especially considering how nervous he was with his head being touched prior to this. It was really nice to see how quick I was able to tackle that and get him over it, and he did really well with that. And since he was doing so well with all of this, I decided it was time to take his neck tag off. It is one of the first things I love to do with these Mustangs. If you guys follow me, you know that. And how I work with these horses is that as soon as that neck tag comes off, I like to have their name and I like to make it official. This is one of those rare cases where I actually had a name prior to getting this guy, and I wasn't going to make it official until I took his neck tag off. So I was pretty excited to start unwrapping this tag and just knowing that I could finally start calling him by his name and start sharing his name. And now that his tag is finally coming off, I can announce to you guys that tag number 6334 is going to be called Stitch. and that is a really cute fitting name for him. I really like it. I had it before I got him, and I just so happened to find the perfect little Mustang to fit that name, and I am super excited about it. Due to some trouble uploading a super long video for you guys, I'm splitting up day 1 with Stitch into 2 parts. This was part 1, it was my first session with him. My second session, which will be part 2, will be up soon, so stay tuned.